We have made it to free agency here in year number 3 of the Golden State Warriors MyNBA franchise here on NBA 2K25. And this is going to be one of the most pivotal episodes of the entire series thus far because it's really going to dictate what the future of this team will look like over the coming seasons as we try to figure out what the plan is for this roster post-Steph Curry. Before we get started, though, I do want to point out that this will probably be the last episode of the series before MLB The Show 25 comes out on Friday. And obviously, with the new game, I'm going to want to have a lot of content, especially with the new franchise series. The team reveal will probably be this Wednesday. So with that being said, episodes of this series and the other two, Kansas and the Broncos, are going to be a little more inconsistent over the next couple of weeks. So I appreciate everyone's patience as I put a lot of focus into MLB The Show 25. And really, once we get into April, things are going to be a lot more normal in terms of uploads here. So not only did we go over the 2027 NBA draft in the last episode, we actually had two drafts as we went over the expansion draft. Now that our league has 32 teams with its two newest franchises, the Seattle Sonics and the Montreal Huskies. So going into the expansion draft, we had 7 players under contract, under team control, and we were allowed to protect 6. The problem is, this was our 7 best players. So we unfortunately, we're going to be letting someone pretty good lead the team. Ingram and Kuminga are too good for us to let go. Salis, Stokes, and Loggins-Burrow are our 3 best young assets. And then between Adembona and Onyeka Okongwu, Bona's younger, and I believe he's a little bit better. So unfortunately, Onyeka Okongwu ended up being the casualty. He was drafted pretty early by the Seattle Sonics, and he'll be one of their better players to start their first season back in the league. So we're going to have to replace Onyeka Okongwu, something that we weren't necessarily planning going into the offseason, being that he was under contract for us. Before the NBA draft, we also had a handful of trades. Plenty of movement across the NBA, per usual in the offseason. The Jazz, who have finished with the worst record 3 years in a row, added some vets, acquiring Jarrett Allen and Aaron Gordon. The Thunder add Deni Avdija to their championship roster, Joel Embiid to the Nets, LaMelo Ball to the Blazers for Scoot Henderson. I'm a big fan of that deal for both sides. And then the Pelicans beginning their fire sale with Darius Garland going to the Lakers and DeJounte Murray to the Kings. As for the draft, we had a surprise at number 1 with Samuel Queen. A lot of people were surprised by it, but I don't think it was a bad pick by the Jazz, especially considering they landed Norwood Nobles, the highest rated player in the class, at number 3 overall. We went into the draft without a first round pick. I tried to move late into the first round, but I didn't want to mortgage any of our young players or any of our future draft picks. So instead, we traded early into the second round, trading away a current and future second rounder to get it done, selecting freshman forward Osborne Outeridge out of the University of Kansas. I don't think he's going to give us some big minutes in the rotation this year, but I really like the upside. 6'10", 230, NBA level body. He can handle. You can use him as a secondary playmaker. He's a versatile defender. Maybe not a good defender, but he can guard just about every position. I think there's a little bit of scoring upside, even though the shooting splits this year at Kansas were pretty pitiful. 39% from the field and 23% from deep. Those do not translate to the NBA, but I think the rest of his skill set and his athletic frame could in due time. And I'm hoping in a year or two, we could be looking at a rotation player, and maybe by the end of his rookie contract, he can be a little bit more than that. So as we go into free agency, this is where we've got to make our decision. I've been hinting about the idea of us making a splash, and I think there's 3 directions for us going into the offseason. The first direction would be looking into free agency, and there's 2 top guys who we would likely target. Wembanyama and Miller are restricted. We're not going to waste our time with them. Kawhi Leonard, meanwhile, is 36, and he does not fit our timeline at all. I look at Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo as 2 players who would be worth shooting an offer to. I don't think it's particularly likely we'd sign either one of them. I think both guys are going to return to their current teams. But it is possible. The Warriors are a big market, a winning organization. I wouldn't rule it out, especially for Giannis. I do have my concerns about both of them, though. Jokic's efficiency has gone down over the last 5 years. Granted, it's still very good, and he is still a phenomenal player. The same can be said for Giannis, but I think he's starting to age a little bit as well. His scoring average went down, which makes sense. The Bucks added some big-time scorers last year. But his rebounds went down, which doesn't make sense because most of their new scorers are guards. His assists went down, which is weird because he took a smaller role on offense. His efficiency is down, which is weird because they had more guys like Jaden Ivey and Kobe White and Paul George to command the attention of the defense. So I'm not really sure why his efficiency and his playmaking went down when there's other guys on the floor who the defense has to pay attention to. So that catches me a little bit off guard in terms of him. The second option would be going to the trade market. We have two very valuable future first-round picks, an unprotected pick from the Bulls this year and a swap best pick next year with the Clippers and the Sixers. I think all three of these teams are going to be quite bad over the coming years. So I don't think the 2 and the 1.5 stars really do those picks justice. I think they would be sought after by NBA teams. We would also probably have to throw in some combination of young players if we want a high-level difference maker. And the 3 guys I have on my radar starts with Ja Morant in Memphis. I could see the Grizzlies looking to move off of him. They're towards the middle of the Western Conference. Mikko Kaponen very well could take the mantle as the franchise player. Ja's on the last year of his deal, and he's going to be 28 years old going into the year. A smaller 6'2" athletic guard getting close to the age of 30 does not bode well for his future. Players of his size and play style do not age gracefully. There's Bam Adebayo in Miami, maybe not the offensive impact that, say, Ja Morant would bring, but he might be a better fit for some of the scoring guards we already have. Now, he's also on the last year of his deal, and he's already 30, but he's arguably the most impactful defender not named Victor Wembanyama in the NBA right now, and he's good enough offensively to where I think he'd be able to fit with our team pretty well. The third option, which I think is the one that would make the most sense right now, is Zion Williamson with the New Orleans Pelicans. I do have some questions about the fit because he is pretty ball dominant on offense, and defensively he is, well, not very good, but he's one of the most dynamic scorers in the league. He's really improved the outside shot, at least in terms of his grades. It hasn't fully translated into consistent three-point percentages, but he was 37% beyond the arc last year. I think it's a foregone conclusion that he will be traded from the Pelicans. It doesn't seem like he's going to re-sign after this coming offseason. The Pelicans traded away 3 of their 5 starters in the last episode. They are clearly selling, and I think Zion's value has gone down with teams knowing that he's going to be on his way out. The third option for us is just run it with this core, and if we don't get the right opportunity to trade for a high-level player or sign a star in free agency, I'm okay with doing that. I like the guys that we've got. Now, obviously, we would have to sign some impact role players in free agency, but I think this team is good enough to at least compete in the Western Conference, and then we could always change our minds during the trade deadline. So we'll start with team and player options. The game thinks we should decline Celis and Bona. That sounds pretty stupid. Both of those guys are going to play a big role for us this year, assuming they are not traded. So both of them will be sticking around. In terms of options, I'm more so curious about Jokic and Giannis. I'm expecting them both to decline, and officially, they both will. So Jokic and Giannis will be entering free agency. Paul George declines for Lord knows what reason. Miles Turner declines as well. That's an interesting one. The Miles Turner-Onyeka Okongwu swap might end up not really benefiting either team, with Okongwu getting picked in the expansion draft and Turner becoming a free agent. We're going to extend the qualifying offer for Jabari Springer and Keone Kaleo going into free agency, and it is a pretty good class, particularly with Jokic and Giannis at the top. It's not every day 2 former MVPs and finals MVPs hit the open market. We can afford any player we want in the free agency class. With Steph and Jimmy gone, we have money to play with. We'll start with Jokic and Giannis. As I've said, I plan on giving these guys offers. I have my reservations about them given their age and starting to decline a little bit. I also don't think that these guys are going to say yes. I think they're going to go back to their current teams, but it's worth the shot. We still have one more offer here in day 1 of the moratorium, and you might think there's not any other clear stars here, but I actually think it's a pretty easy decision. Jaden Ivey's coming off a phenomenal season with Milwaukee. He really broke out, most improved player, all NBA level season. Nearly 27 points per game, 6.5 assists, on solid but not great efficiency, at least at first glance. However, he had a true shooting percentage of 61%. How could that be? on shooting 47% from the field and 33% from deep. Well, what happened is he got to the line a lot. More than doubled the amount of free throws he took last year, despite playing the same amount of games. So I went back before the offseason so I could check his usage rate. It was only 3.5 percentage points higher than it was last year. But his estimated wins added doubled. Obviously, his points went way up. His free throws, as we know, went way up. He was 14th in the league in estimated wins added. First in free throws. Him and Giannis were head and shoulders ahead of everybody else. I get drawing fouls is not a fun skill for an NBA player to have, but if I'm looking for guards, I'm looking for guys who can get to the line. He's 4th in free throw attempts per game, only behind Jokic, Giannis, and Zion, but he's only 21st in usage rate. Now, granted, some of the guys ahead of him really didn't play much, including Keone Kaleo, who's in 11th, but still, he got the ball as much as the average number one option did last year, but despite that, he still led the league in free throws. Now, there are still some questions of if this production is sustainable or if it's a one-year fluke. It took him 5 years and 2 separate teams to really break out. Along with that, how's he going to look as the number one option running his own offense? In Milwaukee, Giannis was the go-to guy, and defenses did not put as much focus into Jaden Ivey. I think it's worth the risk, though, given how good he was last year, but on a short-term deal, a one-year offer with a player option for the second year worth $35 million. So I'm not really expecting us to land any of these guys. Maybe Ivy, his market is kind of quiet, but I certainly don't expect to land one of these two big fish, but I figured it's worth a shot. So let's simulate through the first day of moratorium. Oh! Giannis Antetokounmpo accepted the contract! Giannis is a Golden State Warrior! Is this real life? Well, apparently it is. Per the NBA Central on Twitter, it's happening. Giannis is a Warrior. And this series has been flipped on its head. I did not expect Giannis to leave Milwaukee at all. It seemed like things were going really well there with the additions of Ivy, Kobe White, and Paul George. The Bucks had a really strong year. But after 14 seasons with the Bucks, Giannis wants to turn the page. So after Steph Curry retires, it takes us a whole 2 episodes to find a new franchise player, and I'm really excited about the thought of Giannis's fit on this roster. Say we add an athletic guard for the trade market like Ja Morant, I think that would be the perfect duo. Since Jaden Ivey was so good with Giannis last year, think of how good a guy like Ja Morant would be. Now, Jaden Ivey did also accept our contract, but we're not going to have enough money for it, which is fine because we got Giannis. Jokic, meanwhile, unsurprisingly, returns to the Nuggets. So here now in the second day of moratorium, we're going to simulate into free agency now, just so we can see Giannis to the Warriors in all its glory and have him on our roster officially. Wait, what? Huh? What is this? Giannis signed with the... What? Giannis is back on the Bucks! But I was told he was a Oh. We just got Centel, didn't we? After all that, Giannis Antetokounmpo's going back to the Bucks. We got duped. He changed his mind, got an offer he liked more from Milwaukee, and he's bringing Jaden Ivey back with him. So now we have to go back to square one. No Jokic, no Giannis, and no Jaden Ivey for the Golden State Warriors. Well, that was a fun 3 minutes where I thought we were getting Giannis. Can I go back to that scenario, please? We still have our pickings of anybody in free agency, but I don't really want Paul George. I've got to be completely honest. So, we're going to start with Jabari Springer, who's still available. He wants quite a bit more money than last year, and I think it's understandable. He has earned a pay raise. After spending his rookie season in the G League with Detroit, the Pistons let him go. We picked him up out of free agency, and he was pretty solid for us off the bench. I thought he gave us some really good minutes in the playoffs, and especially with losing Onyeka Okongwu, it feels like a no-brainer to bring him back. Even if we still had Okongwu, I would want him to return, and I'd be willing to give him a nice raise. 2 years for $15 million each with a team option for the third year. It's a lot of money, but it's worth it for a young, ascending player such as Jabari Springer. And after a couple days of mulling the offer, he will accept. I don't know why it took him so long. I mean, his dad is literally the GM of our team. But Jabari Springer is back, and outside of Onyeka Okongwu, along with the 2 retirees, our core from last year is officially back. Let's go 3 days later into free agency now. I did some more searching, and I wanted to add some size. We need to find a way to combat Victor Wembanyama in a playoff series. At first, I thought about Jeremy Sohan, but he's asking for too much money. So then I pivoted to Zach Edey. If there's anyone who, size-wise, will match up with Wemby, it would be 7'5" Zach Edey. Now, he obviously has his physical limitations, and he's been a bust so far. He's been on 2 different teams in 3 years. The stats look fine in Memphis, but it just didn't really work out there, and it hasn't worked out in Orlando either. It's not a matter of efficiency per se. It's not that he's a bad scorer or a bad shot blocker, but his lack of athleticism is a real problem. He's kind of a black hole on offense because, well, he just kind of stands there. And then defensively, he doesn't have the quickness to move around the floor. Despite that, though, in scenarios where he will be matched up with a guy like Victor Wembanyama, I feel like he'll be quite valuable. And he can score a little bit, whether that's off the bench or as a starter. So Zach Edey has accepted the contract, and he will be with the team only for 1 year. It's a prove-it deal. He's got to play well to stick around, but I think it could be a good fit. We've got a nice 8-man rotation brewing here with this group, and then Osborne, Outeridge below them. But 8's not enough. We need some vets. We definitely need a veteran guard. I like our youngsters, but that's what they are. Young. We're going to need another wing as well. So going through free agency, there's not a lot of older guards, but I think D'Angelo Russell could be a good fit. He's been in the league for a while. You know what you're going to get with him. Hot and cold scoring, but a microwave bucket getter. Not a great defensive player, but that's fine. Stokes and Loggins-Burrell are great defensively. So we're going to offer him a 1-year deal. And then as for the wing spot, I like Saddiq Bey quite a bit. He can shoot the ball. He can guard multiple positions. Another guy where you know what you're going to get. D'Lo would accept the contract right away. He is back in Golden State. He played here 8 seasons ago for a very short time. And then Saddiq Bey would sign the very next day. So we miss out on Giannis, unfortunately. But I think adding Zach Edey, D'Angelo Russell, and Saddiq Bey is not the worst consolation prize in the world, along with retaining Jabari Springer. Let's make it to the end of free agency now. Nobody wanted Paul George. On one hand, it hurts me. Paul George is my guy. But, I mean, we didn't want him either, so I kind of get it. Gigi Jackson's an interesting one. I still would suspect he returns to Boston. Jeremy Sohan's another interesting one. It's because he's asking for so much money. Otherwise, I would have been very interested. So Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo are both going back to their previous teams, as we already know. Wemby, Brandon Miller, they are returning as expected. I'm intrigued by Kawhi Leonard returning to the Denver Nuggets. It seems like Denver didn't have a great season last year, but it seems like they want to run it back. And I imagine Nikola Jokic probably told them to re-sign him, and Jokic, being a free agent, had all the leverage. The biggest mover here is Jaren Jackson going from Boston to the Knicks, and I actually really like this fit in New York. Jaren really struggled offensively last year, but I think playing with a point guard like Jalen Brunson is really going to help him play to his strengths as a floor spacer and potentially as a pick-and-roll lob threat. Bilal Coulibaly signs a big deal with the Suns, Taylor Hendricks to the Clippers, Shaedon Sharpe to the Hornets. That's a fun one. The Slash brothers are reunited. Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, teammates in Charlotte. RJ Barrett to the 76ers. Robert Williams signs a very cheap deal with the Spurs. If I knew he was available for that, I would have brought him back. Alex Sarr was in free agency. He shouldn't have been. The Wizards must have declined his team option by accident. LV Mihaljevic was also in free agency for them. So I made sure both of those guys went back to the Wizards, and I'm going to edit Alex Sarr's contract to make sure it's correct. Keone Kaleo accepts the qualifying, and now it's time for player progression. This should be fascinating. I see some big numbers in here. Salis only gets a +1. That's disappointing. But +5 for Loggins-Burrell, +5 for Stokes, and +5 for Jabari Springer. So the youngsters take some big leaps. Loggins-Burrell was not a great three-point shooter last year. It's now an A-. Stokes goes up to B+ inside scoring, B-plus playmaking, that's a big deal. And then Springer's going to be a far more consistent 3-level scorer and a much better rim protector. We don't have anyone higher than an 86, but that's still a massive win. Other big jumpers across the league include Noah Longley up by 6. Jaden Ivey went down by 1. We might have dodged a bullet. The Bulls had a lot of guys go up, but their highest rated player is only 83 overall, Matas Buzelis, so I'm still confident that that pick's going to be a pretty good one for us. Everest McLeon up 6. Lennon Morris goes up 7. He was basically a throw-in with the Gigi Jackson, Keontae George trade last year at the deadline, but he might be the best player in that deal. The Grizzlies did really well here, including Ja Morant going up by 1. Maybe they're going to be more hesitant to trade him away. Shaedon Barnabas up by 6. I think Atlanta's going to be a playoff team this year. Barnabas could be an all-star. Scoot Henderson goes up by 4 in his 5th season. That's a surprise, but a very warranted one for Charlotte. The Jazz have a lot of guys in the 80s. There's no excuse. They've got to win at least 20 games this year. Dennis the Menace goes up 5. Caden Howard, our glorious king, goes up by 5. Javonte Fitzgerald up by 6. He looks to be the next face of the Los Angeles Lakers. Carson Young up by 7. I think that was the biggest jump of anybody. Here's an interesting one. Zion down by 2. So his trade value could take a hit with that. Anthony Edwards also goes down by 2. I'm not really sure why that's the case. Rob Dillingham and Amir Brooks get nice boosts, though. LaMelo Ball regressed. He's only 2 ratings points higher than Scoot now, which is fascinating. I think the Blazers are still going to be really good, though, with Bardo Campolo and Silan Novikov and even Donovan Clingan taking big leaps, but that's a disappointment for them. So now that we've struck out on the free agents, this is really our last chance to make a move and go out and get an impact star here via the trade market. With Loggins, Burrell, and Stokes going up by 5 rating points, you think their trade values certainly would go up. So let's talk about the 3 guys who I have mentioned as possibilities for us within a trade. We'll start with Ja Morant in Memphis. The Grizzlies had a lot of guys go up, including Ja, and because of that, they are feeling optimistic for this season, and they are going to keep him for now. Bam Adebayo will also stay in Miami, but not so much because they should, but more so because Pat Riley is stubborn and old. As for Zion Williamson, the Pelicans are basically begging him to get out the door, and I imagine Zion already has his bags packed. Now, the fact that he went down by 2 certainly hurts his trade value a little bit. Is this a sign of things to come now that he's 27 years old, getting closer to 30 with an injury history, or is it just bad luck? The Pelicans don't seem to want to trade him to us, and after thinking about it, with him going down in rating, with him being in an expiring contract, I just don't think it's worth it for us. We will not be getting Zion Williamson, and instead, he is headed to Toronto. The Raptors have been very quiet in terms of making moves in recent years, but they want to add a 3rd star with Scotty Barnes and Jalen Green. They wanted to hold on to both Jacoby Walter and Baptiste Bisconde, and they're able to do so, trading away Emmanuel Quickley, Nicolas Papadakis, who's a solid young piece, 2 1s and 2 2s for Zion. It definitely felt like his value was higher than this going into the offseason, but obviously that changed. If we were to have made a deal for Zion, I think New Orleans would have wanted one of our bigs, maybe not necessarily Adem Bona, but probably either Jabari Springer once we could trade him, or Osborne Outeridge, another one of our really good young players like Kajai Stokes, and then since he took a big leap in rating, maybe only one of the really good future first-round picks. I just don't think that's worth it for where we are. We've got a good thing going with our young core. Why mess it up for a guy in Zion who I think has the capability to ruin what we've been building? I do like the trade for Toronto, though. I don't necessarily love the fit with Zion and Scotty Barnes, but I see what the Raptors are doing. They're adding a really talented piece for pennies on the dollar in terms of his value. So since we're not going to sign a marquee free agent and we're not going to make a big trade, we're going to stick with this current core. And I feel like this is the right move for us because even if the first half of the year doesn't go well, we can always change our mind and make a move at the deadline. If we were to have traded for Zion Williamson, we would have kind of made our decision there, and there would be no going back. This way, we still hold long-term flexibility. Let's now get through the rest of the offseason real quick. We will start with NBA Summer League. Antoine Salis, Roman Loggins, Burrell, Kajai Stokes, Jabari Springer, Keone Kaleo, and Osborne Outeridge all on the same team. And we ended up doing quite well, 3-0, with a point differential of close to 20. We beat our opponents by 17 points per game. That was 5th best amongst the Summer League. Roman Loggins Burrell was the leading scorer on absurd efficiency, even with an injury. A hip injury, to be exact. Who's surprised? Kajai Stokes averaged 13 rebounds per game. At first, I was taken aback by this, but then I remember his numbers in the G League last year. He was kind of a rebounding monster. Salis was solid. He didn't take a lot of shots, but he was efficient. Springer was decent. Osborne Outeridge had 0 assists. Real ball. As we end up winning the first round here against the Nuggets. Keone Kaleo was not good in the regular season of Summer League, but he was great in this game. Now we've got the Jazz, and this is basically the current Utah Jazz roster. So I would hope they're a good Summer League team. If this is going to be their regular team, I would hope they would beat us, and they do. 123-107. Our leading scorer only with 14 points, that being Salis, and A.J. Jennings, an undrafted guy from a couple years ago who performed pretty well. The Hawks beat the Jazz in the finals. Number 1 pick Samuel Queen had 3 points and 13 rebounds. Meanwhile, Naheem Martin, the former top 10 pick with 28, 6, and 5, leading Atlanta. The Hawks have a lot of really good young players they've drafted over the last 3 years. Martin's the highest drafted of the group. They really like his upside. So now that brings us to the FIBA Championships, and this is the year where it would be the actual Olympics. I went through all the rosters here, and I'll show them to you all. But unfortunately, these don't feel very accurate. A lot of the players on these teams are auto-generated guys who are not even currently in the league. Of the fictional players on Australia or Germany, Keon Walker was the only one who's actually in the NBA, and I didn't even know he was Australian. Look at Team France, for instance. Antoine Salis would absolutely be good enough to play here, but he's not on the roster. Instead, they have fictional auto-generated players here, and they have Killian Hayes starting at the 1. Obviously, Salis should be good enough, but he's not there. So, because of that, that made me feel like we don't really need to go through the Olympics, although there is one Warrior, Zach Edey, on Team Canada, so that's pretty cool. I did not know all these guys were Canadian. Stone Autry and Jabari Ogabari. Zamir Logan, I know, was on the World Team in one of the Rising Stars festivities, but I didn't know him and Zay Logan were Canadian. That's a new one. The Filipino team does not have anyone from this series, which is a little bit of a surprise to me because you would think the prospects made by our glorious Kane Sherwin would be on the roster. For those who know, no. The American team is kind of sad too because how can the best player on the team be the anomaly? Meanwhile, we have Paul George still on the roster in the big 2027. Canada wins the championship over France. Zach Edey is an Olympic gold medalist. Wemby did what he could. If they had Antoine Salis, it would have been a little bit closer. Team USA loses in the semis as the All-Star festivities will be in Los Angeles this year. In terms of the draft class, you guys know the drill. Make sure to go join the Discord. Link is in the description where you can make a player. Damian Lillard plans to retire and will have a farewell tour with the Orlando Magic. And there you go. Our opener will be against the Sacramento Kings. A lot of games I've got my eyes on early. I want to see Charlotte. I want to see Atlanta. I want to see Portland. I definitely want to play the Bucks. We have it out for Giannis now after, well, he lied to us. We're definitely going to play the Spurs at some point this year. I kind of want to play the Jazz. Maybe we can actually beat them once and for all. The Jazz suck against every other team in the NBA except for us. This is what I think the rotation is going to look like to start the year. In terms of our 4 guards, Stokes, Salis, Russell, and Loggins-Burrell, I think it's going to be very matchup dependent and playing guys together who have complementary skill sets. For instance, Antoine Salis and D'Angelo Russell probably will not share the floor a lot together because they have a lot of similarities. Otherwise, Ingram, Kuminga, and Bona wraps up the starting 5 with Springer, Edey, and Bey rounding out the bench unit. So that'll wrap up the episode. Certainly an interesting one. Giannis Antetokounmpo was a Warrior for about 3 minutes until he wasn't. I feel like we were able to pivot pretty well with the guys we did get, and I'm excited to roll with this current young core. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, part of the reason why I did not want to make a big trade is because it keeps long-term flexibility. If our team is playing really well this year, that's great. If not, we can still make a trade at the deadline and make our big move out of necessity rather than a luxury, which it would be right now. Hope you guys enjoyed. Next time around will be the opener against the Kings. Again, with MLB The Show, I don't know exactly when that'll be, but I definitely want to get that up sooner rather than later because I'm really excited to see how this new team will play together. Hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.